Do we believe in nation? A complete betrayal. Nation defined. The word nation comes from the Latin word natio, which means birth, origin, or tribe. It is derived from the verb nasci, meaning to be born. Thus, in its original Latin context, natio referred to a group of people with a common origin or descent. Nation, as its etymology imports, originally denoted a family or race of men descended from a common people. A body of people united by common descent, history, culture, or language, inhabiting a particular country or territory. Remember that our history is their history, so is it ours to throw away? A quote, "We do not merely study the past, we inherit it. An inheritance brings with it not only the right of ownership, but the duties of trusteeship. Things fought for and died for should not be idly squandered, for they are the property of others, including those who are not yet born. If everyone is super, no one will be." An article here from Tim Matheson on Notice and News titled, "If anyone can be Australian, then no one is Australian." Ricardo Bozzi's book on leadership, a quote here from Aesop, "A doubtful friend is worse than a certain enemy. Let a man be one thing or the other, and we then know how to meet him." Another quote, "Blind loyalty is the wisdom for fools. It is rather the case a well-informed loyalty should be sought. Judge them by their fruits. If you are loyal to one who is not worthy, it only damages your reputation." These videos are, as much as anything else, to keep myself intellectually stimulated, but more so intellectually honest. So given my previous blanket recommendation of voting for libertarians as an alternative, I will correct myself here, now, and in the future where relevant with the above in mind. Naval Ravikant says, "It's really easy to be honest about other people's flaws. It is incredibly difficult to be honest about your own." I will continue to address this. While reading the article by Tim Matheson on Notice and News being an outlet I recommend everyone keeping up with, I came across the following Twitter thread. Enter Libertarian Victorian candidate Jordan Ditloff. Despite the recent rollout of their immigration policy, which appeared to, in some ways, attempt at correcting it, if the Libertarian Party on the whole are supportive of Jordan's doctrine here to follow, then I cannot endorse the party in its entirety and instead take a principled stance in opposing this crucial facet of the party's policy or ideology. As after all, what good is it having slightly better economic opportunities if your neighbours, colleagues, students in your children's class at school are nothing like you or your family? Frankly, I'm sick of individuals posing as public servants, giving 6th and 7th generation Australians the metaphorical middle finger without repercussion. Note, Jordan is not even in office, so there is less pressure and fear of losing his seat, and this is his stance on the matter, where he only has to debate genuinely and largely level-headed nationalists. What happens on the issues of the LGBT push on children in primary schools, abortion, gay marriage, topics which the erratic, screeching women and feminine men are so deeply invested in? How do you imagine he responds? Here's the Twitter thread. Elias Priestley, a page worth following on Twitter. Here's a question for you. What is your attitude to the demographic replacement of Australians by Asians and subcontinentals? Do you believe that our people must retain the right to self-determination? Jordan responds, "I do not believe that race plays any part in what it means to be an Australian. I fall into the category you mentioned of third-generation German immigrants. My grandparents moved here after World War II. They did not, nor do I now see Australia as a race or a people, but as an idea. That is what drew them here and away from the sectarian and racial madness of Europe. As a result, my attitude is that I reject a racial or ethnic definition of Australian, and it follows that I reject the construct of demographic replacement and self-determination along imagined racial lines. Elias responds, do you accept that racial and ethnic definitions are possible? Could you define a Chinese person by their race and ethnicity? Or do you believe that race is a social construct? If you don't define replacement by race, doesn't it still apply to citizenship? Jordan responds, racial and ethnic definitions are real, but the beauty of Western culture is that, like the Christian ethos that inspired and informed it, it transcends those things. The UK, America, Australia, and New Zealand are states that do not have an official religion by design, nor are they ethnic states. They are a shared idea. That idea is hard-coded into our laws and system of government in the rule of law. The idea that every citizen and the government should be subject to the law equally in terms of rights and obligations. Note that I am not for a moment arguing we always or even often of late reach that ideal state. My commentary. Jordan says, I do not believe that race plays any part in what it means to be an Australian, and characterising Australia, quote, not as a race or a people, but as an idea. We must then ask, if race, a people, does not play any part, what does? What ideas make Australia Australia? Selling real estate at record prices? A uni-party captured by the construction and property development lobby? Lending money at interest, impoverishing millions? Mining? Laying roads, building overpasses, purely in an attempt to keep up with unsustainable, unpopular mass immigration? Do you wish to put confidence in a man to act in your people's best interest when he does not believe you a people? Note, we see this in Israel and the Palestine conflict. The Israelis do not believe that non-Jews are a people. Put confidence in a man who sees your land as one without borders, without identity, a free-for-all, enticing those who certainly do identify as a people across the seas, opportunists unable or unwilling to contribute to their own people's cause in the homeland. These who desire from us higher living standards than that of their third world slum, as they come in larger numbers, further accelerating our own third world destiny. Notice how the question is on white replacement, and he rejects the premise on the basis that, quote, the UK, America, Australia, and New Zealand are states that are not ethnic states, all countries that are facing white replacement. How convenient an argument. A comical comparison would be the questioner asks, quote, are you concerned about shoplifting in Target stores? His response, I don't believe Target has anything official about anti-theft in modern time. Therefore, I reject the construct of shoplifting. What Target has is universal, like Western ideals, therefore not unique, like Western ideals, and is to be given away, like Western nations, in accordance, that is, in abundance. And besides, just look at other stores like Costco, Audi, and Walmart to prove my point. Questioner, but all of those stores are experiencing shoplifting too. Rebut, that's the beauty. They don't have anti-theft rules either. That's a good thing for the stores and a good thing for the shoplifters. Other contexts. Referencing a leader who doesn't see you as a people. Think of it in terms of a company. It is easy for management to say, we treat all employees equally. But what do you do when your employees aren't clearly defined? I.e., employees working for other companies, the comparison being immigrants serving their own people, from other nations. Employees working for other companies are demanding better conditions from you, the employer, or the government. But as far as you're concerned, these individuals and collectives don't contribute to your or your greater team's cause, your nation's cause. Like an employee, you as the boss can't fire, or immigrants, you as the government can't deport. These people don't actually work for you, you work for them. A tenant you can't evict, a homeless drug addict or violent foreigner you can't detain. You work for all of them. How well can a leader lead if his team is not clearly defined? If a leader is supposedly leading, defined as, quote, providing direction and guidance, if a leader is leading, if he is leading everyone, he is leading no one, as some need more than others. Much as if you are speaking for everyone, you are speaking for no one, as some need priority over others. If you're supposedly serving everyone, you are serving no one. We understand this with the differentiation of equality versus equity in the universal basic income debate, for example. The family. Joel Davis, debate versus Drew Pavlo on Slightly Offensive on Rumble. Timestamp, 1 hour, 26 minutes. He goes, quote, if we were to say it doesn't matter who your parents are, all children deserve a totally equal love from the community, and so you should love every child regardless of whether you're their mother or father or not, then all the children would be basically neglected. The only way in which to secure good stewardship over children is for their particular parents to love them more than any other child. He goes on, if I was to say I love all people equally, I don't care what race you are, what I'm doing is I'm depriving my people of my affection and my concern. Further, quote, it is a ridiculous notion that we should care less for our people. If you were to say it doesn't matter if someone's your family or not, you should love them equally. I say no. I love my brother and sister more than I love some random guy on the street, otherwise I'd be a terrible brother. In the same way, I'd be a terrible Australian if I was to care for an Indian as much as I care for someone who is also Australian like me. Quote, if everyone in the family doesn't love each other and cares for other people outside of the family just as much as the people inside the family, it destroys the family. And the same thing happens to a nation. That's what's happening to my nation right now and every white nation on the planet. We don't love each other enough. Continued. We need to love our countrymen. Thus, our countrymen need to be defined. The simplest is along racial and ethnic lines, the next being religion or ideology, the very last being vague blanket ideas of opportunity and hard work. To reiterate Joel's points, how well can a father protect his children if all the youth are his child? We can tie this to the astronomical rise in children of single mother households, introduction of foster parents, and children raised by the state through state school curriculum. Further, how well can a husband protect the mother of his children if all women are his wife? The rise in polygamy as a sign of decay. Strong tribes were built on monogamous marriage. This was something worth fighting for, a fierce loyalty. Elias goes further, says, you're slipping between culture and race as if they're the same thing. I grant you that other races can adopt broad Western culture, at least individually or in small groups. That doesn't mean that the person changes their ethnicity. If ethnicity is real, why don't Australians have one? Jordan responds, Western culture, of which it means to be an Australian is a subset, is a meta-narrative that can and should sit above dimensions of someone's identity, religion, race, or tribe. The problem is not that white Australia are the, quote, only group not banding together and fighting for their racial destiny, as I imagine you would put it, but that the idea of Australia that once clearly transcended sectarian ideas of who we are has frayed to the point that people are reverting to tribal groupings. Further commentary. Jordan says, Western culture, of which what it means to be Australian is a subset, is a meta-narrative that can and should sit above dimensions of someone's identity, religion, race, or tribe. So Westerners, meaning British, Irish, and Europeans, white people, and their supposed culture is not a product of them. They're defined as belonging to or associated with the people. Their culture is not an output from them, an ethnicity, a race, a people, as the input. Culture is just vague ideas entirely detached from the people who founded those ideas. Culture is ideas, but as he states, not religious ideas or more so teachings, having already covered morality and virtue, dignity, right and wrong, honesty, fairness, law, order, justice. Ideas outside of this leave us with what exactly? Anti-white, anti-Christian globalist ideas. All other non-whites view in the ethnic collective, so-called Indian Australians, Chinese Australians, Filipino Australians, Vietnamese Australians, Lebanese Australians, even the Europeans, Greek Australians and Italian Australians, Serbian, Croatian and so on. They are all on their own sides when it comes down to it. This is evident, this is known. But he sticks to his guns, says it is not an issue that whites aren't banding together. It's only that the, quote, idea of Australia, a country that used to be only British and Irish, then on to only European immigration, the idea of Australia has, quote, frayed and no longer transcends race. This is through the introduction of masses of non-British and European. Jordan does not wish to make the connection that the, quote, fraying is the non-white immigration, a differing ethnicity. Ancient wisdom. For Aristotle, democracy is possible only within homogeneous ethnic groups. A multi-ethnic society is thus necessarily anti-democratic and chaotic. Tyrants and despots divide and rule. They want the city divided by ethnic rivalries. Rank hypocrisy, quote, but our existence. Peter Drew artwork. A video from the British Australian community on YouTube says, the message itself is fairly clear. It implies that the term Aussie has never had any racial or cultural connotations whatsoever, that a tribesman from the Kalahari Desert or a native of Outer Mongolia can be given a plane ticket and a passport and instantly be as Australian as anyone else. We see Labor has recently fast-tracked some 12,500 citizenships in swing electorates to better position themselves for the upcoming election. This would not work the other way around. A clearly white man with the caption Chinese, Indian, Japanese, Korean, Nigerian, African American, Afghani, or heaven forbid a clearly non-Jew with the caption Jewish or Israeli. This would be racial appropriation and, quote, not acknowledging our existence, our history, and unique differences that make us who we are. Therefore racist and anti-Semitic. But not when you do it to whites. This is instead brave and diverse or progressive, taking a bold stance against our oppressive colonizer ancestors and the inhumane white Australia policy. It is not brave to say anyone can be Jewish and that Jews don't exist and their replacement should be celebrated, however. This is obviously hateful. It becomes obvious when they're not white. Over to an expert, Dr. Bruce Pay, from South Australia in Focus with Mark on Rumble. I myself think very highly of Bruce. He is a supremely intelligent, pragmatic individual who I overwhelmingly agree with. His assessments relating to, but not limited to, smaller government, medical interventions and general health outlook, monetary policy, economic climate with fundamentals of supply, demand, price and value, need for manufacturing and energy independence. He is very good starting from first principles. I wish to look at his take on immigration, touching on themes of nationalism, national history, and identity. In episode 35, timestamp 23 minutes 10, referencing John Howard, who dictated, quote, "We will choose who comes to this country and the circumstances under which they come." Bruce agrees, says, quote, "Seems reasonable. It would be like me saying, I would choose who I let in my house and when." The article reads, "We can't afford to duck the immigration debate." Bruce correctly identifies, quote, "Well, there hasn't been a debate. We've just had it shoved down our throats, haven't we?" Article goes on, quote, "Countries have a right and even duty to keep their character. Having a non-discrimination policy," Bruce interjects, "in other words, open borders, doesn't mean accepting everyone from anywhere all the time." Bruce says, "And that's right. Nations have a character that has been built by the citizens of that nation, and you can't change that without the consent of the citizens of that nation." Consent of the citizens has not been given. The introduction of the 1975 Racial Discrimination Act under the Whitlam government, which superseded 1901's Immigration Restriction Act, was not done through a plebiscite, i.e. a vote by the citizens. Change for good or change for bad? Bruce admits, quote, "Australia has changed, and it's changed markedly in the last 20 years. Markedly, if those who don't know, means clearly. So it is clearly changed in the last 20 years. But we ask, is it for the better?" Bruce says shoved down our throats, implying we don't want it. Is that because we know it is not good for us? His interjection, quote, "in other words, open borders," shows his understanding of the Trojan horse of non-discriminatory immigration. It is a subversive takeover, a conquest without counter. Quote, "Nations have a character built by its citizens." I'd say this is correct. The UK, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand have all been built to a certain standard, similar in many ways. What do they all have in common? Look at all of the countries that make up Europe, their standard, similar in many ways. What do they have in common? Now, what do all African countries have in common? What do all the Middle Eastern countries, those without access to the riches of oil, what do these countries have in common? India, Southeast Asia. The separation of race and culture. In the same episode, at timestamp 2725, Bruce states, quote, "Culture is the shared set of ideals that people in our society agree to. It helps them interact in a friction-free way. Race is completely different. Race is your genetic heritage. It's where your genes come from. And I want to make it perfectly clear, I don't give a toss what your race is. I don't care what country you come from. What I care about is whether your culture collides with mine. I don't care if you look different to me and come from somewhere else in the world, as long as you become Australian." We will revisit becoming Australian throughout the future. Referencing the sprinter Gout Gout, Bruce says, quote, "When he opens his mouth, he sounds like an Australian. He's got an Australian accent. When he runs for Australia. Gout Gout is an Australian. He's adopted our culture, he's one of us, and I celebrate it. And I don't care the fact that his family originally came from Sudan, and he looks different because he's a genuine Australian." Bruce later speaks to the reality, quote, "For the last 20 or more years, immigration policy has prioritised large numbers of immigrants from countries with different cultures and different languages. And it's told them that all countries are equal and we celebrate your culture. And that's producing what's called balkanisation. Australia is turning into a whole bunch of disparate tribes which are fighting, and I don't want that. I want new immigrants to become Australians. I don't want Australia to become Sudan, and I don't want Australia to become the Middle East, which is what we've been seeing recently. With all the old hatreds between the warring groups, they've been transplanted here. Has anybody asked us if this is what we wanted?" End quote. Culture as an expression. I will interject and raise the following as it relates to the separation of race and culture. I instead want to explore that culture is the expression, manifestation, the result of a people's, a race's, collective intellectual capacity for the development and study of ideas relating to all things. For example, the study of our physical world, biology, chemistry, physics, based in mathematics. Mathematics used to engineer structures and mechanisms, and that of which we do not hold in our hands. This is philosophy, theology, morality, justice, fairness, dignity, respect. Separation continued, and again in episode 39, timestamp 3330, Bruce makes the separation. Quote, race is classifying humans according to physical or biological characteristics, and those are genetically acquired. Skin color, eye shape, height, body morphology, etc. Opposed to culture, quote, a way of life, especially the general customs and beliefs of a particular group. He goes on, quote, I think race is irrelevant. I think culture is the thing that determines the differences between groups of people, not race. Further states, quote, I don't care if Australia is multiracial. I just care if one race has got a different set of rules. A rules-based system. To Bruce's point, if the concern is when a race has a different set of rules, rules informed by their, quote, culture, but a culture somehow not linked to them, their race, where our being whites, Europeans, and even East Asians, our rules are do not cheat, do not lie, do not steal, do not be greedy, do not get angry, do not get jealous, do not hold resentment, do not seek revenge, do not take credit not earned, do not blame others for your mistakes, do not instigate prosecution on the innocent, do not alleviate prosecution off the guilty. How do we respond when amongst us are a people, a race, whose set of rules, informed by their, quote, culture, a culture being an expression of their collective intellectual capacity for the development of ideas relating to all things, what if their rules are that they do steal, they do cheat, they do lie, they are greedy, they get jealous, they get angry, they hold resentment, they seek revenge, they take credit not earned, they blame others for their mistakes, they instigate prosecution on the innocent, they alleviate prosecution off the guilty. We fear being coined a racist by attributing this opposition to them, their race, which they cannot change, so we instead call it culture, which they supposedly can change. Question: if we bring them in large enough numbers, how will they change when they only surround themselves with their own being the ones who created this very culture we take issue with? Another way to phrase this: how are they to change their culture without being acted upon by an external force, white social correction? It is shown, if left amongst their people, their expression of their culture will remain, as in Africa, the Middle East, India, and Japan, Korea, and China, just the same. Algebra. I earlier highlighted how Bruce said, quote, nations have a character that has been built by the citizens of that nation. So if we can agree that Sudan, the nation, is made up of Sudanese people, the citizens, and similarly, the Middle East is made up of Middle Easterners or Arabs, can we also establish that the UK, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand were made up of British and Irish at a time? Europe made up of Europeans. And if we do not want Australia to become Sudan, for example, as you have explicitly stated, what need is there for citizens of Sudan, who built Sudan, to come to Australia, a nation built by non-Sudanese? If nation is built by citizens, nation derived from citizens, or nation equals citizens, then the citizens equals the nation. In algebraic terms, a group, or citizens, group X, call it GX, produces, we say builds or equals outcome, nation, outcome X, call it OX, and group Y, GY, produces outcome Y, OY. Now ask, how would replacing part of the original sum of group X with group Y continue to produce absolute sum outcome X? Rather, it would gradually produce an outcome closer to outcome Y. As has already been proven, group Y produces outcome Y. Homogeneous group X without group Y has already produced absolute outcome X. If you are an enjoyer or citizen of outcome X, you are unwise to support the invitation of group Y, as group Y has not produced outcome X. Thus, it does not benefit you, an outcome X citizen, an outcome X enjoyer. Group Y has never produced outcome X in history. Group X produces outcome X like clockwork, no matter terrain or climate. Hopefully you get the subtext here. The only variable is X and Y. The relationship of group G and outcome O remains proportionate. You cannot break math by being nice, caring, or compassionate. Finally, to be or not to be an Australian, ask ourselves, is it interests, hobbies, pastimes to watch cricket as Indians, Sri Lankans, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, West Indians, Zimbabweans all do? Is it food to cook meat on a hot surface, something that the Japanese and Koreans do, as we too enjoy as part of our backyard summer barbecues? Is it the accent, a simple act of imitation, the parrot, a literal bird with the brain the size of comparable to a large walnut, is capable of imitating? Is this the bar? Your liking of warm weather and the beach, like islanders in the Pacific or Southeast Asia, don't appreciate this. To sing and dance, like the Arabs. That we have interesting wildlife. Have you ever visited the African savannah? To care for our young. Wild animals do this instinctively, so are lions Australian? If all of these sound comical or bordering offensive and undermining, I ask you then, why don't we deserve more respect? Why are Australians an idea? Continue. Honouring the fallen. Is it that we pay our respects on Anzac Day and Remembrance Day to our fallen soldiers and those survivors that served? They served for a country once made up of a homogenous people that now supposedly isn't defined by anything beyond vague, quote, non-religious ideas, certainly not defined by its people, descendants from those ancestors the soldiers went to fight to protect. They sacrificed their own lives for an idea open to the masses, the Chinese, the Indians, the Arabs, the Africans, the Jews. Many other countries, white and non-white countries alike, hold strong honour in their history. This does not make them Australian. They necessarily have an interest in their own people. Current day, these people are descendants of the people who created the history they know and cherish. They are close to, not at all concerned with the Australian people, who are not descendants of those who went to war to protect their own country. And why should they be concerned? After all, Australians are not even identified or defined by a people. As demonstrated by Peter Drew's artwork, it is just an idea, and as so beautiful put by Jordan Ditloff, the Libertarians' Victorian Senate candidate. Programming versus the reality. This, quote, everyone is Australian rhetoric does not lend itself to nationalism, rather globalism, a great levelling. Globalism being a sure cancer running deep into the bones of our society, our nation, our people, rotting us from the inside. Nationalism is the cure, but it will not come easy. There are many powerful people with a vested interest in ridding the world of nationalism for good, opening up the floodgates to their globalist plans. We are being invaded. The thing about reality, you don't need to come to terms with reality for it to be, for it to play its course. leaving you with this: compare the pair. A photo here from the Labor Members of Parliament in 1901 compared to Labor Member of Parliament 2022. You can see for yourself. Summary: do not submit to those telling you, a man descendant from men who came here in the mid-1800s, that the country he and his men built isn't yours to have, rather is open for everyone else, whose country they are fleeing from due to poor conditions, because they are not descendant from great men. Their men did not create what we have inherited. They are instead taking it away with the help of global anti-white power. Virtue is an individual trait, not a collective one. Be individually virtuous. Those surrounding you will follow. Galvanize, collectivize, unite, strengthen, honor. Do not relent. You can do this by meeting with your close friends and family members, individually or in groups, to discuss where you sit with these ideas. Develop them from your own experiences. I will make another video expanding on the ideas of collectivism compared to individualism. Emphasis on promoting nationalist representatives and advocates. Word of mouth is still a very strong tool in our arsenal despite media suppression and smear campaigning. Hold them all to account. No one is above reproach. Members of Parliament worth keeping up to date with: Alex Antich, Gerard Rennick, Malcolm Roberts, Mark Latham, Craig Kelly. Other commentators: Joel Davis, Blair Cottrell, Tom Sewell, Punter Politics, Jordan Knight, Ozpill, and Philip Seuss on X or Twitter. No one member is perfect. For instance, based on theyvoteforyou.org, both Russell Broadbent and Matt Canavan, who many on the right believe are strong representatives of Australian interests, have consistently voted against restricting foreign ownership, which is something I view as self-explanatory, as well as many other real nationalists. That is all. Thanks for watching. Share if you found insightful. Comment your thoughts, criticisms, or future video suggestions. Thank you.